Roe being overturned has led to calls to expand the Supreme Court, add up to maybe 4 more justices. Others are calling for term limits. Would you support either of those?
Certainly, I think term limits are an area where we want to look into, or an age limit, or whatever it might be. I also think we should look into term limits for members of Congress as well.
How long?
For particularly the House, I would say 8 years. I think we've seen right now what happens at the 8-year mark with someone like Congresswoman Stefanik, who's really embraced her own political career at the expense of our community. And so I think we would otherwise prevent her from running in this cycle right now if we had an 8-year limit on Congress.
Speaking of voters and what may motivate them this election year, do you think voters are paying attention to the January 6th committee hearings that have played out this summer? Have they raised sufficient questions about what led to the attack on the U.S. Capitol and what the people around the former president and even Mr. Trump himself either did or didn't do leading up to and during the rioting?
I'm certainly hearing from voters across the political spectrum that they are paying attention and they are concerned. Listen, we have to protect our right to vote and the results of our elections. This was an effort, a crime that was committed in order to overturn the will of the people, the foundation of our democracy. And that assault came from the highest levels of government. So we deserve transparency and truth to get to the bottom of what happened and to hold those accountable for those who participated. I have concerns about what Congresswoman Stefanik knew, how she participated. She certainly voted to decertify the election. She has continued to promote the big lie. This is something that she has now personally benefited from in terms of grifting $250 million that came in the aftermath of January 6th, and some of those campaign proceeds wound up in her campaign fund. And so Congresswoman Stefanik is now a chief defender of the actions of January 6th as well as the participants. And she, too, bears some responsibility and should be held accountable at the ballot box.
Is addressing climate change a major priority for you? How big of an issue is that for you?
It's a big issue for our district because it's not just a question about the threat it poses to our planet. It's about the question of the threat it poses to our economy. You know, much of the park relies on the tourism dollar. And so the quality and length of time of our snowpack for our ski slopes matters. And so if we have, rising temperatures that impact that impacts everyone in our community. Our farms and our agriculture rely on avoiding some of these really severe weather patterns that could lead to flooding and actually, reduce or undermine our crops. And so combating climate change presents a challenge that we need to address in order to protect our economy, but also an opportunity to invest in economic growth. We have tremendous natural resources, wide open spaces, a lot of sunlight, a lot of waterways that can be utilized to help generate the kind of energy that would allow us to diversify our energy sector, reduce gas prices, give some people some relief. And so there's tremendous opportunities there. We also talk about it a little bit from a national security perspective. And I'm encouraged that this administration has recognized it as a national security challenge, climate change, that poses a direct threat to things like our southern border. You look at climate migration from a humanitarian challenge. This is something we want to make sure that we're protecting against. And our forces out at Fort Drum, particularly the 10th Mountain Division, they're trained in Arctic warfare. And so as Arctic sea lanes open up and they become spaces for great power competition with China and Russia, it has direct implications for some of the forces that exist within our district.
You speak of the southern border. Is that a crisis there? Has the Biden administration been slow to deal with the security issue there?
Well, listen, I think there's blame to go around with both parties for many decades who have failed to address the challenge of securing our southern border. And it has implications for our northern border. I've spoken with border protection officers here in the northern portion of the district who are undermanned. They're overworked. They're having to go on resource deployments down to the southern border. They're facing serious mental health challenges. So we need additional resources both from a manning perspective, infrastructure, but this is an area where both blame goes to both parties here. This is something that we need to break through the partisanship and the political benefit that some folks seem to derive from keeping this as a cudgel for one party versus the other and actually address the problem.